Welcome to Light Over Heat with Professor David Imani. Let's talk about chainsaws, guns, and the urban-rural divide in America. In episode 9, I talked about a Forbes reporter who spent a year reporting on the business of guns in America, and she criticized guns by way of an analogy to chainsaws. And she said, some people say guns are tools, but nobody buys 10 chainsaws in varying colors and speeds. Well, this passage brought the chainsaw nuts out of the woodwork. Any number of people in the comments on my YouTube channel and on my blogs talked about the number of chainsaws they owned, 5, 10, or more. And these chainsaw super owners were a revelation to me because I don't own a chainsaw, in the same way that gun super owners are often a revelation to people who don't own guns. Although there's a lot of different ways to understand this difference, I think the urban-rural divide in America is certainly an important part of this. This reminds me of a story of when I went down to a Cerakote shop called Infectious Designs about an hour from where I live here in North Carolina. And to get there, I had to travel a number of 2-lane rural roads and highways. And on the way back, there had been a storm and a fairly large tree had fallen across both lanes of the rural highway that I was on. And I can't remember exactly, maybe 2 or 3 cars back from the tree. So it had fairly recently fallen. And we're in a situation where if I had to turn around and go back, I would have to add miles and miles onto my trip, and also not knowing the best way to go, not knowing whether other trees had fallen. I sat there and was assessing what I should do when I realized that there were already people who had chainsaws out and were cutting up this tree and removing it from this road. One of the people was someone who was driving a semi. He was first in line on the opposite direction to me. I think one person had come out of their home, maybe one other. But the reality in this rural area that I was in was that people had chainsaws to take care of this job. And being from the suburbs and someone who doesn't own a chainsaw, I realized that if a tree had fallen across my road in front of my house and I needed to get out somewhere, I would be on the phone frantically calling someone from the city to find the right agency to get someone to come out and remove that tree for me. And that's a really big rural urban or rural suburban difference in America. If you live in certain rural parts of the country, you really do rely much more on yourself and your neighbors to get certain things done. Whereas if you live in suburban areas or urban areas, you really rely much more on central government to get certain things done. And of course, this translates into some of the real political differences that we see in America. It also translates into some of the differences in the way that people see guns in America. In the same way that I and my suburban and urban neighbors prefer to outsource our tree cutting to other people, we often also prefer to outsource our violence to other people. So if we are in need of violence, rather than taking it upon ourselves to use violence, we pick up the phone and we call other people to bring violence with them. Now, of course, my argument is that guns are normal and normal people use guns, but it is the case that guns are more normal in certain areas, like rural areas, than other areas. And speaking of the normality of guns, you may have noticed that I'm not wearing my usual attire because I'm wearing my Homo sapiens Projectile Club shirt to tease future video in which I will talk not just about the sociological normality of guns, but the anthropological and archaeological normality of guns. So stay tuned for that.